Well, let me officially welcome you all. Good evening and welcome. My name is Scott Murray, and I'll be serving as your Master of Ceremonies this evening. It's a real pleasure to be your host for this evening's event, honoring a great American, Mr. John Albers, Chief Executive Officer of Albers Aerospace. And we're so glad that you could join us tonight because this is really going to be a special evening. For those of you that have been here in the past, you know what I'm talking about. So those here for the first time, welcome. And those that have returned, we're delighted to see you again. We have two objectives this evening. First, to honor our Congressman Sam Johnson, Defender of Freedom Award recipient, and second, to simply have a good time. And certainly we thank those of you that are in the audience that have served, and just wherever you've chosen to be a part of tonight, we are really excited that you're here. We'll have lots more to share with you and say a little more about John a little later on in the program, but for now, what I want to do is simply welcome you all and say just have a good time at your respective tables. We're going to start with the program with a presentation of colors by the Color Guard of the Marine Air Guard 41 from Fort Worth. And the national anthem is going to be sung by our good friend, Ms. Alexia Carter, former Miss Teen Texas. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you all please stand for the presentation of colors and remain standing for the singing of the national anthem, and also remain standing for our invocation that will be provided this evening by our good friend, Mr. Jim Blythe. Color Guard, present the colors.
Early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in prayer, please? Lord God of the universe, we are so eternally grateful and thankful for your blessing over this event. All the participants, we thank you, dear God, for watching over us this evening as we enjoy this. Thank you for blessing the nourishment of our body, the food that we're about to eat. Lord God, we thank you for putting a hedge of protection around our active duty military, those who run into the fire, along with the first responders, and those deployed overseas who are facing the fire. We thank you, God, for protecting them and protecting their families. Dear God, we thank you for the leadership of the veterans that are in this room, the men and women who work to bring this nation back together. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In your holy name we pray, amen.
All right, the colors have been retired, so please be seated. Thank you, Jim, for the invocation. And ladies and gentlemen, I might make note of the fact, for those of you that have been here in the past, you say, wait a minute, that's the gal that's been here before. I'm talking about Alexia, who sang our national anthem. And I don't know about you, but I think she did a great job, didn't she, Alexia? And so too our color guard. So we thank them all very, very much for their participation this evening. Well, thanks again to all of you for being here tonight as we gather to celebrate and honor an extraordinary individual who lives the example of service demonstrated by Congressman Sam Johnson during his 65 years of public service. Unheard of. And beyond that, I mean, it was just above and beyond to celebrate the ideals that really lie at the very core of our shared values as Americans here in the greatest country on the planet. In your program, you're going to be able to see the sequence of events tonight. And as I said, we are here to recognize and certainly honor Mr. Albers. And in the first part of our program, we'll do just that. After that, we will enjoy the dinner prepared for us by the great staff here at Heritage Ranch, and then reconvene to enjoy and hear from another great leader, Lieutenant General Mark Wise. He's very wise, but his middle name is Not So, all right? General Wise and our good friend Jim Falk will be discussing some of the current challenges faced by the United States each and every day. That said and done, I now would like to introduce to you Chuck Daniels. He is the president of the National Defense Briefing Series, and he's got some welcoming remarks he'd like to share. So let's put our hands together and welcome Chuck to the podium.
Well, thank you for that. As Scott said, I'm Chuck Daniels. I'm the president of NDBS. And while this is not in the script, I would like to ask the board members of NDBS if you would please all stand and be recognized for the work that you have done to put on this event. I'm ad-libbing a little bit, so we got Mark Liebman back here. I'm on the board. We have Steve Solka over here, and Rich Kniss and Ted Pachaz in the back. I want to formally thank you, gentlemen, for all your help to create this evening. Also, if it has anything to do with military and veterans, medical or children, Scott Murray is going to be involved. So, Scott, you have added your professionalism to our events now for 23 times in the last 5 years. And my friend, I just want to say thank you. So on behalf of NDBS Board, I want to add my welcome on top of Scott's. We appreciate the fact that you're all here. We formed in June of 2021, and to be honest, when we did our first security brief, we didn't know if we'd do a second. But we filled this room with almost 200 people, and Admiral Pat Walsh, the former Chief of Naval Operations, Pacific Fleet, came and spoke to us. And we've been doing these events for 5 years now. So it's been a success. Each of our service organizations supports veterans, first responders, youth education and training, and many of the community programs and events. And we decided that by pooling the resources of the 5 organizations that make up the National Defense Briefing Series, that we could be more effective in supporting both personally and monetarily the 5 organizations that are in your program. And I think we've done that. Our primary objective is to bring to this area world-class subject matter experts speaking on issues of national security. And if you go to our website, you can see many of the programs that we've produced. So this is our 23rd. You saw vignettes of the past programs that were being displayed as you came into the ballroom. And our secondary objective is to raise funds for the 5 organizations that make up NDBS. So some of the charities that we support, you can see on the screen here beside me, to symbolize the core values of our member organizations, and with the approval of Sam Johnson's family, we created the Congressman Sam Johnson Defender of Freedom Award. Beverly Briney, Congressman Johnson's daughter, will speak later. But we're honored to have them, and that's why we're here tonight, is to present that award. There have been 3 previous recipients. The first one was Scott Murray. The second one was Darcy Anderson, and the third was Joe DePinto. Joe DePinto was the former CEO of 7-Eleven. So we could not have found a better prospect for our award than John Albers for our 4th presentation. I want to tell you how enjoyable it's been to work with the outstanding Albers organization. We learned a lot while we put this together with their help. So Rico, Abby, Abigail, Rebecca, and all the others at Albers, thank you for your help, and at times when it was needed, your good humor. So I want to say welcome again and thank you for being here, and I'll turn the mic over to Scott. But I do want to say that as a 501c3 organization, all the money that we raise goes out to other organizations. And we have all the money that we need. It's just in your pockets. So please consider that. We would love to have you contribute and support us. Thank you very much and welcome.
All right. Thank you, Chuck, so very, very much. We very much appreciate all you continue to do day in and day out on behalf of the series as well. Well, events like this, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm sure you well know, depend on the generosity of our sponsors, and you're going to find listed in your respective programs. To start things off, I would like to thank our title sponsor, Albers Aerospace, not only for their generous financial support, but as Chuck has said already, for the help the staff provided in developing really presenting this program here tonight. They made things that are awfully hard at times quite easy, so we thank them very, very much from the bottom of our hearts. I'd also like to recognize and certainly thank our other sponsors, Iron Gate, Bank of Montreal, Truist, Delta Black Aerospace, Albers Community, Ozark Bank, Shamrock Capital, Hilltop Holdings, and J.P. Morgan Chase. Their logos are on this slide in your program, and we thank each and every one of them very, very much. We won't know for a few days what the actual total of our sponsorships will be, but I can tell you this, that our member organizations, the veterans and the students that they support will benefit greatly from the funds raised by this event. So let's give them all a well-deserved round of applause. Now, as I'm sure you all can probably easily figure out, we could not have put this together without our event co-chairs, whose names you see here. These individuals provided advice and certainly helped reach out to the incredible crowd of folks with us tonight. So we thank them both very, very much. And I would like to briefly recognize a few other guests as well. In addition to John's friends and family, who you'll recognize, we'll say a little something about them a little later on, understandably. We're honored to have with us tonight Congressman Keith Self, who represents the same district that Sam Johnson did years ago. So thanks for what you do to represent us in our nation's capital. Where I haven't seen the oh, there he is, right back there. And also in attendance is Rose Galt. Mrs. Galt is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Strategic Diversity Integration and Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force Manpower and Reserve Affairs in Washington. So we thank you as well for joining us tonight. I'd also like to recognize and certainly thank Ms. Beverly Briney, the one of Sam Johnson's 2 daughters. Chuck made mentioned her just a moment ago. Beverly and her family have been faithful supporters of our program as the award and what have you continues on behalf of her father, and you'll hear a little more from her tonight. Beverly, there she is, right there. Thanks for being here, my friend. We'll see you shortly up here on the stage. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, certainly like to recognize the young men and women who are our nation's future. You may have noticed that we have with us tonight 8 students from the McKinney High School Marine Corps Junior ROTC Unit. Yeah. There they are, all the way in the back. Thank you all for your service upcoming, and certainly thank you for being here tonight, men and women. Delighted to have you all here. Well, the future of our country and all the volunteer force which defends it and certainly depends on it, depending on our men and women like those who understand the obligations of living in a democratic republic and see service as something bigger than themselves. And many of these young cadets have attended our regular programs and volunteered to pitch in tonight to help with the setup, with the parking, the coat check, escort duty, and whatever they needed to have done. I mean, they were there day in and day out, but tonight, once again, coming through, so we can't thank them enough. And you probably saw and hopefully talked to them during the reception. You may have noticed also that they ran the coat check tonight. So if you need to leave early and need to retrieve a coat, let one of our NDBS board members know. All you've got to do is raise your hand in the back of the room, and we'll get it for you. So once again, let's put our hands together and thank them for what they do. All right. Well, in your program, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see a brief bio of Congressman Sam Johnson, for whom our Defender of Freedom Award is named. Congressman Johnson spent, as I mentioned earlier, 65 years in the service of his great country, including 29 years in the U.S. Air Force and 29 years in the U.S. Congress, where he represented Texas's 3rd Congressional District, where we are tonight. He flew 62 combat missions in Korea, where he was credited with an air-to-air kill, and another 25 missions in Vietnam, until he was shot down in April of 1966. Think about it. Almost to the day as we sit here in the first week of May in 2026, I'm talking 1966, exactly 60 years ago last week. Think about that. Yeah, think about that. He spent nearly 7 years as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam, including time at the notorious Hanoi Hilton. He served 7 years in the Texas legislature, and before being elected to his congressional seat in 1991. Congressman Johnson was a staunch conservative, and in his post-military career was a consistent advocate for the military and all of our veterans. So we're delighted to, in his name, present this award again tonight. The Defender of Freedom Award recognizes individuals who embody the traits demonstrated by Congressman Johnson, things like patriotism, faith, service, and certainly concern for our nation and the men and women who defend it day in and day out. You can see the award right here. There it is, right? You see it on the screen, but it's the actual award is over there between the two chairs. If you can see it up there from wherever you might be sitting tonight. And it just... The inscription on it says, the awardee will have exhibited long-standing, consistent, dedicated support to our nation and those who defend it, particularly to causes and organizations which stand for the American values of patriotism, leadership, and selfless service, demonstrating personal sacrifice, initiative, and the courage to defend our nation and to directly support those who stand in the gap for our collective security and peace. Very, very special. I was the first recipient of the inaugural, as the inaugural Defender of Freedom Award in 2022, and I've been very fortunate to have received lots of awards. But I'll tell you what, this is one of my favorites. This is one that means so much because of who it represents, what it stands for, and you just heard the criteria for it. And in my home, my wife and I have it right there. I can't go any place in my house without seeing it every single day. It's very special, and that's what it's all about because of people like Sam Johnson. The second award, as we mentioned earlier, went to Darcy Anderson, and then that was in 2024, and the third one was presented to Joe DePinto from 7-Eleven just a year ago. And it's a great honor, as we've already mentioned, to be able to be on the stage tonight for the presentation with just Mr. John Alberts. Those of you who know John know that throughout his entire career, he's devoted his time and certainly his great energy to causes which support our military. And you'll hear more about that. Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to hear more about it right now, because it's now my pleasure to introduce to you Brigadier General Rico Uribe, USMC, retired. Now, I've got a bio here that goes from here to Lubbock, so hold on. It's a long one, folks, but he deserves every last bit of it. So listen to this. Rico retired from the active duty ranks of the United States Marine Corps after 32 years of honorable and faithful service. He's a 1989 graduate of Cal Poly with a civil engineering degree. Received his commission as a second lieutenant November 10th, 1989. Earned his Naval Aviator Wings of Gold back in 1992 on the Commodore's list for academic and flight distinction, and was selected to fly the KC-130 Hercules. He's also earned his gold parachutist wings. Now, he deployed to every geographic commander area of operations and participated in numerous ground and air combat operations in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and multiple humanitarian assistance operations in the Pacific Theater. He was a forward air controller with the 1st Marine Division during the Battle of Fallujah, Operation Ailfall during 2004 for 8 consecutive months, no less. He commanded that at the Platoon, Squadron, Marine Aircraft Group, Combined Joint Operational Unit, and the brigades levels. He was selected as the 2003 Commander of the Operational Test Force's Tester of the Year for the evaluation of the KC-130 aircraft, and he has earned numerous personal and campaign awards, to include the Bronze Star with V for Valor and Purple Heart medals. He's happily married to the former Lynn Marie Egan of Newport Beach, California, and together they have 5 sons, 2, I might add, active duty U.S. Marines, and the youngest is a midshipman, Marine option, at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Rico, would you be kind enough to come up here and say a few words? Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the Brigadier General himself.
So, can you all hear me? Thank you, Scott. That almost sounded like an obituary. You know what I mean? Like, I should be laid the ground later on. But hey, today is about John Albers. I am privileged and honored to work for Albers Aerospace. And oh, by the way, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I will echo what Chuck said earlier, Chuck Daniels, and a lot of people made this happen. This did not just happen by itself. It takes a lot of time and effort. John asked me to help him with this, and I gladly supported. But you know, as Marines, we're knuckle draggers. We don't communicate well. So we need videos to help you understand where we're at. So Stephen, we're going to play what's called the Founders video for Albers Aerospace, and it tells a story of where we're at right now and where we're going.
I tell people I'm not that smart, but I'll outwork you.
I got to fly that airplane, by the way.
I believe in America and its way of life, and there's people who want to be against it. I'm not for them. I want to be a part of the apparatus that helps make that security happen. I was trying to figure out who I was, figure out like what really drove me and everything else, and it kept coming up. You should be an entrepreneur. I had to reinvent myself, right? So there's an identity with being a colonel, right? And there's a role. You need to behave a certain way, act a certain way. There's expectations of you. And it's not that I didn't like them. I enjoyed them. I thrived in it. I wanted to be a general officer. And I thought I had a chance. And then, you know, some decisions get made by the system, and it was clear I wasn't going to be one. From not not going to be that. I want to go do something else with impact. I need something to get up and go fight. The catalyst would be sitting in there with Secretary Stackley, listening to all kinds of meetings where they're talking about the problems in the industrial base. When I'm listening to these guys back in 2011, we've got an industrial base problem. We have got to fix this. Like, that's the gunshots. Like, I want to run to that. How do I go solve that problem? My wife was there. If she hadn't said yes, this thing wouldn't exist.
The early days were hard. You know, he was always present for our family, but I could see the weight of the world on him. It was actually a really difficult time.
With no business experience, all I knew to do was study other businesses. How did they do it? Every one of these big businesses was small at one point.
The moment in the office, the first office with the folding table, I was going to leave, and I said, wait, let me take a photo because this is humble beginnings.
I was dreaming of building something and being able to solve that industrial-based problem. I'd love to say I had some secret sauce about how we got through it, but it was really my faith. I'd say at that point it was my faith. Hey, Lord, I don't know what to do. Trying everything, right? I'm telling you, every time he would show up, God would show up. We always made payroll. We never missed.
It was a hard few years, but also very exciting because you would just see step by step by step how God was opening doors and bringing people, and really humbling to watch them trust John.
I knew what he brought to the table. I knew his leadership. I knew the type of vision he had.
Many of our teammates are veterans, but I was surprised at the level of respect and support for the warfighter.
What made me nervous and scared before joining was just the size of the company. It was a risk.
The phrase that we told ourselves is rocket ships do one of two things. They either blow up or end up in orbit. We were going to jump on the ride and see where it takes us. That first time we saw the blue wall with the Albers logo and the desk in front, the 6-inch block lettering of the oath of office to the Constitution in the background. It was just a really compelling moment of like, man, we have a shot at this.
He has persevered through failure and opposition time and time again, and that has been a huge part of his story.
What I want to do, man, is be impactful. That's really what I want to do. I want to be impactful for the warfighter, for the folks that work with us.
When you see the larger companies, the top of the company just seems removed from the execution phase, and John is still very much a part of it.
And I think the same principle holds for the entity as it does for the individual. I don't need it to be that we are on the front page of some magazine or newspaper or anything like that. I don't need the thing that I'm in or a part of to be it. I like being the quiet provider that's making a difference. But the whole reason I built this thing was to solve a national security problem in the industrial base, and we just did that this year.
Just our size and our reach is much different now than when I joined, but the flexibility and the small company feel is still there.
What excites me about the future of Albers Aerospace is the people that we get to build a culture with and continue what we've started, and then the problems that we're going to solve.
There's a lot of impact left to be made. We're a team that keeps getting better every day. If you're watching this story's a long way from over.
So
That's John Albers in a nutshell. In a video produced, video. That's an oxymoron, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the man. He and I have known each other for 35 years. We met each other as second lieutenants, and we hit it off, but we went in different directions. He went to the Pacific. I went to the greatest squadron in the United States Marine Corps, VMGR 352, but anyway, that's a different story. But we kept crossing paths. And where we came together was at Pax River. We were asked or tasked to get the KC-130J to the warfighter sooner than later. And John and I met. I'm like, hey, dude. Actually, it was him. He's like, hey, dude, we can do this faster so I was an operational test director. He was a developmental test pilot. He's a smart guy. I'm the knuckle dragger, right? And I'm just telling him, hey, dude, I need to get this in the dirt. And he wants to do it all clean. But he was like, we can do this faster if we get data test points together. And I'm all about it. Because at the end of the day, just like he cares about today, is getting capability to the warfighter, it was getting capability to the warfighter. So we got the KC-130J into the fleet 2.5 to 3 years earlier than anybody thought we could. Faster than the Air Force. The Air Force is still mingling whatever they were doing. I'm sorry. But we just, we literally, the Marine Corps and the Marines had an asset that they took to Afghanistan shortly after 9/11 because of John's efforts. So that's where I got to know the guy. Fast forward 30 years, I thought I was getting out of the Marine Corps, after 5 years. I was still in 32 years later. I don't know what happened. But anyway, so he calls me. He's like, hey, dude. And he always says, dude. Hey, dude, I heard you're retiring. I'm like, how did you know that? I have my sources. I'm like, yeah, I am. I'm retiring. It's like, hey, why don't you fly out to McKinney? I want to show you something. So he literally flew me out, and we had dinner at a place called The Yard in McKinney. And he said, I want to make you an offer. And, when you're retiring, there are I've been told there are three things. If you're going to continue to work, there are three things you need to consider. Location, satisfaction, job satisfaction, and then compensation. And to me, location and job satisfaction were like right up there. Compensation I didn't really care about. I'm like Chuck Yeager, I'm still getting paid. How much you're going to pay me? You're going to pay me. That's fine. I want to make an impact. And John convinced me that I could make an impact with Albers Aerospace. And at the time it was the Albers Group. Now it's Albers Aerospace. But this man has a philosophy like I do, and that's why I agreed to join. And that is faith, family, and whatever it is that you're doing. So it was faith, family, core for me. Now it's faith, family, Albers. And this is the most faithful man that I know. And he and I align in that way. So it is my pleasure and absolute honor to introduce this year's awardee, John Albers. Call sign FATS.
Alicia, come on. All right.
Can we get Beverly up here as well?
All right, thanks everybody. You can please be seated. That's something else. Obviously I was interviewed for that thing, but watching it is just a killer. So Thank you, Rico, for the kind introduction, and to the National Defense Business Series. Okay, Sam, the boss is telling me something here. What am I supposed to do?
I'm sorry to do this, but we got
We get the order out?
yeah, we got a little out of order here, folks. And yeah, so what we were supposed to do next was get Beverly Briney up here. This is Sam's daughter. She's one of Sam's two daughters, and her sister Ginny, her sister Ginny could not be with us tonight, but sends her congratulations, certainly, and best wishes. Now, Beverly and Ginny have been staunch supporters of our program, and we're honored to have Beverly with us tonight. Hello, my friend. This is my table mate. We're sitting together over at our table, and she's just great. She's just above and beyond. But after Beverly's remarks, I'm going to ask John to come to the stage at that time, and also like to invite Brigadier General Rick Rico Uribe and Colonel Thomas Lee, commanding officer of the Marine Air Guard 41, representing the Marine Corps, to also join us here on the stage. And if there's anybody else there that wants to come up and join, no, just a joke, folks, just a joke. So Beverly, my friend, would you like to start it off? Get us going here. Thank you so much for being here. On behalf of your incredible dad and your family, we're delighted to welcome you. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Put this down. So I get to say a little bit more about Dad. And I'm Beverly Briney, as you know, Sam Johnson's youngest daughter. I'm here tonight with my husband, Scott, and my sister Jenny sends her regards from North Carolina, which is where she is. I'm honored to participate in the presentation of the Sam Johnson Defender of Freedom Award, and I also thank you for coming this evening. Most of you know already Dad's background. You heard some of it. Air Force, starting with ROTC, flew in Korea. He was in the Thunderbirds, head of the Fighter Weapons School. Then he went to Vietnam, which ended in nearly 7 years as a POW, with 42 months of those years in solitary confinement. A total of 29 years in the Air Force. Then, in the political arena, he served in the Texas State House, then in the U.S. House of Representatives for a total of about 35 years. It was like two separate lives, he told me one time. We were sitting at the kitchen table, and he told me that. He was far removed from the military, though not his love of it, and he served for about as many years in Congress as he had in the Air Force. Behind God and Shirley, his wife of 65 years, flying was the premier love of his life. But behind these was his love for people. He cared for those around him and those who worked for him. It was personal. He was faithful in his devotion to God, but without that love, he would not have developed the perseverance to survive as a POW, which further developed his character to serve as an honorable and respected member of Congress. In fact, he received an award for that, bipartisan, from all the members. That character, though, influenced the lives of those around him. I recently heard two similar stories from two friends of my dad's who did not know each other, but both knew him for about 30 years. And I'd like to share those just real briefly. The first is of a friend who fell off a ladder and broke her hip. The surgery went somewhat awry, and she was in excruciating pain, and it took several months for her to recover. She called me out of the blue and enthusiastically retold the event, and then she said, "I kept saying to myself, if Sam Johnson could endure 7 years of torture in a prisoner of war camp, then I can endure this pain." She said it was what got her through. A week later, literally, another friend called and shared a story of a mutual friend who was undergoing cancer treatment. This person who had worked for my dad, the mutual friend, early on in his political career, he'd worked for Dad. Apparently, the ordeal, disease, and treatments were physically painful. His comment was, if Sam could endure the pain of torture, I can make it through this without complaint. Two stories from completely different arenas with the same response of using Sam Johnson as an example they could reach out to for help through a difficult time. It made me see that Dad's life, particularly his POW experience, was an example way beyond his family and close friends, an example beyond being nice to those around you, an example of endurance, pushing through and living on the other side. My point here is that though he rejoiced in people, he served people by being who he was, a believer in Christ, a lover of his family, and a servant to his country. And those characteristics are the kind that demonstrate what is needed to defend our freedoms, looking to the well-being of others by living strong. Thus, this award is accurately named, and it is in that spirit that I am proud to present the Sam Johnson Defender of Freedom Award to a well-deserving recipient, John Albers. Oh, yeah, we get to do that. Hand it to him?
Yeah, hand it to him.
Come on up. Lisa.
Ladies and gentlemen, our 2026 Sam Johnson Defender of Freedom Award honoree, Mr. John Albers. It's all yours.
Appreciate
Very
it.
welcome.
Yep. Where's it? Your mark there and mine's here. All right. Okay. Take two. Beverly, thank you for that. Rico, thanks for the kind introduction. For the NDBS folks, thank you for the honor of this award. Humbling for sure. I still am not sure why. But as Rico said, he and I have known each other a long time. And so friend, thanks for your effort making this happen. The poor general had to act like a Lance Corporal a couple times. That's zero disrespect to the Lance Corporal, just tells you how hard he was working, right? The board works very hard. Chuck mentioned this, but they work very hard. This whole organization's intent is to raise funds for other organizations. And so that's really what put me over the top on my willingness to accept this award. It's a great idea and a great cause. And so this is certainly fun and interesting, but the real reason that we're gathered here is not just to talk about John Albers for a little bit. It's really for us to try to raise some money for some veteran organizations that need it, okay? So many of you here have given to that, and I hope that everyone else will. The size of your donation doesn't matter. $10, it's the act, right? So tell folks about it, tell your friends about it. It's worthy of your hard-earned dollars for sure. The most significant part of this award, in my opinion, is that it pays tribute, as the name indicates, to a great American and warrior who had two very significant and intense consequential careers. Colonel Sam Johnson as an Air Force aviator, which is significant enough, frankly, by itself, putting yourself at risk, flying for our country. But he also spent 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton. And as I keep hearing about that, obviously, I know about that. I think about there's a few young people in here. If you don't know what that was, you need to go look it up on the web. That is probably the worst hell that a person could live through, all right? The Hanoi Hilton, there is a great irony in that. And so for that man to survive that is a testimony of his hardness. But I think surviving in Congress might be a close second. Congressman Self might be able to attest to that. He was a servant and a defender of our freedoms in uniform and out. He served the people of the 3rd District well. And as I said, Congressman Self has chosen to do the same. Congressman, thanks for being here. Thanks for serving us in D.C. Ms. Beverly, thank you for making time this evening. Again, it's a great honor to meet you. I had the privilege of meeting Congressman Johnson in his office on Capitol Hill in January of 2018. I went there to, I had gone through the transition coming out of active duty, and as an 06, I got some special treatment, and I said to myself, like, good Lord, and I didn't even realize at the time, like, this isn't really that good. And Elise and I's son-in-law, at the time, he was an E2. He's an E5 now, a staff sergeant in the Air Force, and I thought, good night, man. If that kid gets out, he's going to get garbage. Like, we got to go try to make this better. And a college friend of mine and I were on the Hill trying to advocate for a better transition program. And so that whole piece is something we're very passionate about at Albers Aerospace. We support a guy that's down at Texas A&M helping the veterans that are in school figure out who they are, how they're wired. And a lot of them are just there because somebody told them they got to go to school, and they don't really know why they're there. And I want them to figure out who they are, how they can make an impact in the world, and invest in them because they were willing to take an oath and sign up to defend the Constitution for our freedoms. So, Beverly, Lisa and I have a daughter, and you can see it still is it's something that stirs inside of you, right? And so I trust you walk tall as the daughter of Colonel Sam Johnson. So, and speaking of daughters, I want to thank Abigail. She did a lot of work helping Rico, and it was a big lift. She's a mom first, a wife of a TACP airman. She works for us part-time, and then, excuse me, her passion of health and wellness. And I'm biased, but I think she's pretty damn special. Thank you. They're PCSing. He's stationed at Fort Campbell right now. And they are PCSing next month, and this was the one weekend where they could, with her husband, they could go look for a house to live in, and so that's where they are. Her mother-in-law is watching the kids, and so, yeah. She called me, yeah, I think they did find one, but she called me this afternoon and said she was sorry she couldn't be here. General Wise, thanks for coming. Absolute privilege for someone of not so stature and accomplishments to come take time away from his bride and come celebrate this. It really is an honor to have served with you, and not directly underneath you, but certainly at the same time. When he was Deputy Commandant for Aviation, I was an acquisition guy. And so that you would come do this is amazing, so thank you, sir. To my wife, Elisa, as the video said, she could have said no. Because what most of you don't know is that Thad and I tried a business right when I retired, and we got smoked. I mean, smoked, man. We lost a lot of money, a lot. And I borrowed more money to keep trying to fix it because I didn't know what else to do. I weigh 220 pounds right now. I weighed 176 pounds from stress, okay? I was a colonel, and people stood up when I walked in a room, and I'm standing in the back of a dry cleaner putting clothes over the thing. You better have respect for those people, man. That's hard freaking work. And, you know, I didn't know what to do. And a guy at church was like, you sick, boy? You know, you got cancer or something? And I was like, no, dude. I'm trying not to go broke, man. And so I went to work at Raytheon. And 5 months into it, I was like, oh, I can't do this. I got to try again. And that woman said yes. She could have told me, no, boy, you're going to freaking work and you're going to take that salary. And she let me take another risk, and that's really the reason we're here. So she gets all the credit. She really does. We just, yeah. We just celebrated 35 years. But her answer to me was, if that's what you think the Lord's telling you to do, then I'm with you, right? And I really did feel like that was what the Lord was telling me to do. And so Jesus, yeah, he gets the real credit, she gets the earthly credit. So, yeah, if he wasn't doing what he is in my life and what he has done, I wouldn't be standing here. And so I also want to thank Mag 41 for the commander and letting his Marines come. That's a special treat. We were driving in, and my 18-year-old said, "There's Marines here?" You know, he hasn't been around that in a long, long time. So, Fugs, thanks for having your Marines out. I really appreciate it. The weight of the title, Defender of Freedom. should not be missed. It is beyond humbling to have that phrase associated with my name. Freedom, besides our time, is one, if not the most precious, non-living assets that we all have. We live in a broken and busted world, and there are evil and nefarious people that, because of sin, want to rule with an iron fist over others. They want to oppress people and deprive them of a life of freedom in the context of a society that, while imperfect with its norms and values, make living what it should be. We are blessed to be Americans and to live in this country. It's a long way from perfect, but it's the best damn society on the planet. And until Jesus returns, there's no other place I'd rather be. So here is my charge. Yeah. Here is my charge to you as I yield the microphone to our dinner. Be defenders of freedom. You don't have to wear the uniform to do that. What you need to do is be a good citizen. Work hard. Treat your fellow Americans with respect. Value ideas and the ability to live like we do. There are people that don't want us to live this way. Participate in the governmental processes. Love your neighbor as yourself, even when their ideas are different. Think more of others than yourself. In a world where everyone wants notoriety and 15 seconds of fame on Instagram or a Facebook page, be the person who just quietly gets stuff done. At Alberts Aerospace, we get stuff done and get to be defenders of freedom in the work that we do supporting the warfighter. There is nothing else I want to do in this chapter of life. Thanks for coming. Thank you, NDBS, for the honor. God bless you and God bless America.
Well said, John. Thank you so much, and congratulations once again. John, if I could, would you bring Elisa back up here? And John, and also Rico and Notso, come up here as well. And Beverly, would you make your way back up here too? We're going to get one quick shot of everybody up here on the stage because we are honored tonight to honor John. Come on up here. Just kind of stand right in the middle of the stage. You see those little spots there? Yeah. And we want to recognize John's teammates. On behalf of the NDBS board, we also have a bouquet of your favorite flowers presented by the McKinney High School Marine Corps Junior ROTC. So come on up. Yeah, go ahead and present them. Yeah, the two ladies are the ones that are getting the. Okay. I don't think the guys will be concerned. Okay, yeah, the two ladies. Now it says here I'm supposed to get in this picture, so excuse me. Thank you all very much again. We're now going to take a break for dinner. A couple of people that are going to be here on the stage and want to show them our utmost respect because we're really excited that they've decided to be here with us tonight. To help us move forward and talk about all that's taking place in our world, we're privileged to have with us tonight our special guest, Lieutenant General Mark Wise. His bio is in your program, but he has a deep expertise in the Pacific area of operations, called out of the National Defense Strategy as one of our key strategic areas of concern. During his career with the U.S. Marine Corps, he served as the commanding officer of Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 122, commanding officer of Marine Aircraft Group 12, the commanding general of the U.S. Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory, and as the assistant wing commander, 3D Marine Air Wing. He served as the deputy commander, United States Forces Japan, working extensively with the U.S. Embassy in the country of Japan, and negotiating for Japan's support, delivering the first increase in financial support in 20 years, valued, believe it or not, at $1.8 billion, with a B, $1.8 billion. He performed as the commanding general, 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing at Marine Expeditionary Force in San Diego, California, preparing and deploying the aviation support and the staff for combat operations. He functioned as the assistant deputy commander and commandant for combat development and integration at HQ Marine Corps in Washington, D.C. of our nation's capital, where he provided strategic, mission-critical oversight of the evolution of the Marine Corps within the $45 billion combat capability portfolio. And then in his final active tour of duty, he served as the Deputy Commandant for Aviation at HQ Marine Corps in Washington, D.C., and acted as the principal advisor to the Commandant on all aviation matters within the $15 billion portfolio until he retired. He holds a Master of Arts in National Security and Strategic Studies from the Naval War College and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the University of Washington. He's a licensed pilot, prominent member of multiple professional affiliations, including the Marine Corps Association, Marine Corps Aviation Association, University of Washington Trustworthy and Pragmatic Undergraduate Mentorship Program, Husky Landing, and the Military Officer Association of America. He has numerous, and I mean numerous, personal decorations, including the Distinguished Service Medal, Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Medal, Air Medal, Strike Flight Air Medal, Joint Commendation Medal, and both a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal. The list goes on and on. It's very impressive. Lieutenant General Wise, we thank you for joining us tonight. There's no question about that. It's an incredible legacy that you have left us all with. Well, sharing the stage with the General is one of our old friends, Jim Falk. Jim is the President Emeritus of the World Affairs Council of Dallas, Fort Worth, and is well known to many in this audience, having served for 2 decades as its President and CEO before retiring to Santa Fe back in 2021. Maintaining a strong Dallas connection, he hosts Perspectives Matter. It's a program on KERA, North Texas National Public Radio member station. So we're delighted to welcome a longtime friend to many of us, and that's our good friend Jim Falk. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to turn it over to you. Jim, come on up. Turn it over to you so you can introduce or get the Lieutenant General up here as well.
Good evening, everyone. So the toughest decision I had is when you're on a stage with somebody like this, do you say, General? Not so? I don't think I better do that. Or we've gotten to be able to talk with each other and become friends over the last few weeks. So if I may, I'll just call you Mark. Please. Does that work for you? As you said, this is a tumultuous year, but we're only in, 4 months? Now, this is the 3rd year that I've had the honor of doing this, and every speaker, whether it was Kay Bailey Hutchison, former U.S. ambassador to NATO and, of course, our senator, or last year, Mark Esper, everybody talked about the need to focus on Asia, the pivot to Asia. And all of you know that's not so easy. And it certainly isn't easy this year. We'll talk a little bit about Iran, but more about what are the implications of what's happening there on Asia. And with, in a sense, so little attention paid to the Western Pacific, what a pleasure to be on stage with you tonight to do that.
Thanks, Jim. Really looking forward to it.
And this is a very knowledgeable audience, but I will say that I had to look up to be sure that I understood when you talk about, from a military standpoint, what is the Western Pacific?
Well, a lot of folks would probably think the Western Pacific is somewhere west of of Hawaii, but in fact, to be perfectly accurate, it's the east coast of Japan, running down through got a big map up there. Running down through the South China Sea and including the Philippines on the way down.
And we talk about some of the commands, CENTCOM. You mentioned earlier Admiral Walsh. Give us a sense of the size of the command, how it's divided, because from what I understand, it's not just one base. I mean, it's really extensive.
Very extensive. So Indo-PACOM, as they call it, is headquartered in Camp Smith, Hawaii, in Oahu. And they oversee essentially half the Earth's surface, so oceans and continents. Out of 195 countries that are currently recognized in the world, 38 of them fall under CENTCOM, or I'm sorry, under Indo-PACOM. So an incredibly extensive and expansive requirement. And it's funny when you talk to folks that are on that staff and working in that area, they're never home because there's a lot of ground to cover.
And how many personnel?
Well into the 40, the Marines alone have just over 38,000-ish at any given time out there. Maybe not today because of certain events that are going on in the world, but I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. But overall, you're in the 100,000 plus range of all services flowing through there.
So give us a sense, if you would, how many people are in, say, the DMZ, South Korea, Japan, Philippines?
So, and it of course rotates, as you know, within Japan, especially with the Marine Corps side, which is the one, of course, I am most familiar with. But having been on the Deputy U.S. Forces Japan side, it varies. So the Marine Corps side of it, you've got it spread between Okinawa, Iwakuni, Japan. You've got some forces in Korea. You've got debts and exercises going on in the Philippines. So you've got a pretty expansive laydown, and that's just the Marine Corps. You've got the Army as well, and in almost all of those places, as well as the Air Force having a considerable footprint. It fluctuates a little bit because they're moving around the theater all the time, but you're talking in the tens of thousands.
And the budget?
I'm sorry?
The budget?
The budget, the budget's a hard one to answer because you've got the services doing the force providing, right? So technically part of that budget's actually supporting Indo-PACOM. And then of course you've got the exercise budget fluctuating all the time. So it's hard to put an exact number on that because it comes from so many different places.
You know, when you think about the footprint of our armed forces and force projection, what is really the mission of what we're doing there? How are we going about doing it? And perhaps another follow-up is, how has it evolved in the last few years given the growing perception of a threat from China?
So a lot of people would think the mission is just simply being present, and that is part of it, for sure. But really, it's a term that we use called theater security cooperation. So you are exercising with our allies and partners constantly. For example, when I was on my first tour in Japan, I was lucky enough to have two opportunities. I was in charge of all the fighters for the Marine Corps in the Western Pacific, and of course we worked with the Air Force closely out of Okinawa as well. But the thing I liked most about it, and to kind of exemplify the theater security cooperation approach, is I was constantly on the road. I was in Korea, I was in Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, South Korea, constantly visiting units that are flying with our neighbors and allies, either doing local one-on-one training or out doing exercises like Cobra Gold or Cope North, Balikatan. There are, numerous exercises where we're always going back and forth with our allies and partners, and it's not just to fly with them, it's building that familiarity, it's building those relationships, it's building that trust that really comes into, are we going to be there for you?
have these joint operations that you do, so every so often we read about them in the paper, and sometimes they've been postponed or canceled. What's the status of that now?
It's really never going to change that much, right? Because a postponement or a cancel can be for any number of reasons, right? It could be a relationship issue. We've had that happen with Thailand in the last few years, where we stopped exercising for a short period of time. Those things come full circle. The Philippines were the same way for a while. We're always in South Korea, as you know. Japan, we're always there as well. So the status is very strong, actually. I mean, most of those exercises I just mentioned, they may change names over time, which they do, but there's still the same sort of engagement and opportunity to work with our partners and allies that we are constantly doing. It really, like I said, even when it fluctuates, it bounces back, which is a great thing, actually.
But when you think about some of the countries, especially I think about the Philippines, where at times we've really had a close relationship with the president, and other times it's not been so good.
Right.
Same thing, surprisingly, with South Korea, and even in recent history with Japan. And yet, I guess that underscores the importance of the relationships that you're building over years with the military.
Right. Yeah, it's the relationships with all of them, they fluctuate, like you just said. I would also say that it's not just the U.S. relationship with a country, a bilateral relationship. I used to talk a little bit about, when I was Deputy U.S. Forces Japan, the relationship between Japan and South Korea, which is probably as good now as it's ever been, but there is a long history of distrust. Way back to the colonization and the way back really prior to World War I, right? So that relationship, they talked about a trilateral relationship. Really what it was two bilateral relationships, right? It was us in South Korea and us in Japan. And those relationships, of course, fluctuate, because now it's probably as strong as we've seen it, probably out of necessity, when you talk about China and some of the threats that exist within the Western Pacific. So out of necessity, they come back together. But those relationships are pretty strong, and I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about some of the effects of what's happening in the world today and in those relationships and how those might evolve.
You make such a good point, because it underscores as Madeleine Albright would say, the United States is the indispensable nation, because no other country could create that bridge between. Oh, look at that. Wow. Do I sound that croaky? A bridge between Japan and South Korea, the way the United States is able to do.
Right. Well, that trust is absolutely critical. I would say also that some of the challenges, and I don't want to get too much into Iran's effects until you're...
We're about to.
Oh, yeah, I figured. So I didn't want to spoil alert. Iran does have some effects on what's happening there, right? Because it has a lot to do with, I would say, some rhetoric and some discussion points that maybe are in the news with respect to NATO and the viability of NATO. But the important point to realize in the relationships that are everywhere, the Western Pacific being of eminent importance to the United States, is the fact that those comments have effects, right? Far-reaching effects. So when you talk about things like NATO and the transactional nature of the comments, you've got allies and partners in the Western Pacific also listening to that and wondering, how does that affect them? And how does that affect the United States commitment to them? So that certainly affects the fluctuation of the relationship. And it's not all bad, by the way, I don't think, right? So let's take the NATO example, for instance. So comments are made about NATO's support to what's happening in Iran, all right? And so it comes across a little transactional. However, is that all bad, right? Because there is some expectation that what's in our national interest is also of interest to others, and you would expect a long-standing relationship, folks to step in when the time comes in this particular case. And if they aren't, it can come across in a very harsh way, but that still causes some perturbations within other relationships.
But we need to remember that NATO was formed really as a defensive alliance and not offensive, right?
Well, okay, I agree with you, but I also would say if you're going to call, not you, but just public in general, if you're
Go ahead, go after me.
Yeah, no, because I know you'll come after me. No, if you're going to go after Iran and say that it is an offensive action on the part of the United States, I would say probably not, right? I would say it's very defensive in nature if you think about it, because if you've got state-sponsored terrorism that is permeated around the globe, so they're supporting the Hezbollahs, they were in large part responsible for Gaza, they're supporting the Houthis who continue to attack Israel. All of that, and those are just a few of the party, right? All of those sponsored by Iran and being responsible for thousands of American lives lost. And really not just American lives, others get caught up in that. So I would say it's very defensive in nature. So that's what I would throw back.
Well, there's a reason why you're on the stage, so I'm glad you made your point. In my little cheat sheet here, or in my folder, I have a number of articles pertaining to the shortage potential of U.S. munitions. Right now we have 2 carriers. There were 3 carriers.
Right.
Now there are 2. One is heading back happily to the United States after being gone for almost 300 days.
Setting a record, by the way. Like
Excuse me?
295 days at sea.
Yeah.
Longest a carrier's ever been at sea at any one given time.
Some of the military personnel have been moved from Asia to the Middle East theater. Interestingly, they don't say that the THAAD unit has been moved, but they say parts have.
Out of Korea.
So how concerned should we be that this movement of munitions, and we'll get into, I think I'd like to ask you in a minute more about procurement issues, but how concerned are you now that we do not have the munitions that we need to defend or or serve as deterrents to our adversaries in Asia?
Very concerned, and I wouldn't say it's just because of the pull to Iran. So to your point first, so I look at it in 2 ways. You've got the munition side of it, which is definitely of large concern. You've got the forces side, they kind of go together. But at one point, as you mentioned, we had 3 carrier strike groups supporting operations in and around Iran. You had 2 guided missile destroyers out of Yokosuka, so out of Japan. But you also had, on the Marine Corps side of the house, 2 MEUs deployed out there. The 31st and the 11th, I think, was the other one. But it's not just that, because at the same time, as everyone knows, we had Southcom area of operations. We had 22nd MEU down there supporting operations around Venezuela. So you take all of those forces off the East Coast, West Coast, Japan, and you put them in and around Iran, they're not really providing that same level of deterrence out in the Western Pacific. The ordnance side is similar in ways, because when Ukraine kicked off, the first thing that happened is they started sending weapons to support the Ukraine side of the conflict, right? And so that started to draw things down. And that usually, they call it a presidential drawdown, to be precise. And what happens is they ask you what you can provide, and then they ask you where the pain point is. And then you tell them where the pain point is, and they take a little bit more. And then you're like, okay, now we're having some issues that you get concerned about, right? Then you add Iran, that happens, right? And in Iran, we are shooting what I would call fairly exquisite weapons at a cyclic rate. Necessarily so, right? When you get out there, you got Tomahawks going off, you got SM-2s and 6s coming off of ships, you've got precision-guided munitions coming off aircraft.
And let me interrupt and just ask you to give us a sense of the cost, because not everybody, many people in this audience certainly know, but some may not, the impact of asymmetrical warfare that we're seeing in Iran.
Great question. So some of these missile systems are in the multi-million-dollar per weapon, right? So you're talking anywhere from $800,000 for some of these weapons up through 1.6, 7, 8, depending on which weapon system you're talking about. And so when you shoot off a whole bunch of those, there's a cost to replace that, right? And there's a cost in more than just money. It's materials that are required to make those weapon systems. But when you start, decreasing the magazine depth, if you will, to that degree and that quickly, really over time, a few years, we're in a spot where we need to rebuild that. And that doesn't happen fast, particularly when you're talking about some of the unique materials required. The asymmetric piece of it, which is another good question, is the fact that if you look at what Iran's been shooting, and this is kind of true in Ukraine as well, but Iran's been shooting these things called Shahed one-way attack drones. I usually pronounce it a little bit different, but I'll save that language for a different time. And what happens is they launch these things, but you've got to defend your bases and stations and your people. And so what do? You shoot at them, and you shoot them down. You shoot that $1 million missile against a $20,000 drone, and you start cooking those things off, pretty quickly. Ukraine, an interesting anecdote, if you don't mind me adding, because it kind of proves the point. I was listening to we'll just say it was a senior official in EUCOM, and he was referring to the conflict in Ukraine with the Russians, and he was talking about inexpensive drones, think loitering munitions, your ability to shoot things, let them go, find targets, and kill those targets. And the initial complaint was they were having, at the time they were talking about a 19% success rate. How horrible is that? And he said, not at all. Why? Because you could shoot a large number of those weapon systems, very inexpensive, and even if 19% make it through and you kill a whole bunch of high-value targets with that 19%, the reason the rest of them didn't make it through, the 81%, is the fact that somebody's defense systems just went up. So you're taking somebody's attention away. They had to shoot at them, or they had to defend against them, kind of like we're talking about in Iran. And so they're putting assets and ordnance against that. Was that other 81% that didn't make it a loss? It sounds like a pretty big success. He said the fact is that if you were shooting exquisite weapons of the expense we just talked about, you could probably do it for a week until they went Winchester. However, you could take these inexpensive attack drones and you could blanket the skies for 3 months and keep going. So it's just a very interesting way to look at this asymmetric approach.
And that's what makes this war so concerning, that it could go on for many more months. And what's the cost of an AWAC? And
you're in the several $1 million, hundreds of millions.
And at least 2 were knocked out.
Yeah. Yep.
When you and I first met a few months ago, I think we both knew what the Strait of Hormuz was. You studied at the National War College. I studied it at the University of Virginia in international law and Middle East politics, about the same period of time that Islamic Republic has been there. choke points are now something that we're really realizing is severe. And I wonder if you might talk about what is the most significant choke point, although probably nothing is as narrow perhaps as the Strait of Hormuz. But I was reading about the Strait of Malacca, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia said just a few days ago, that's not a bad idea. Maybe we should start charging.
Bad idea. So, but a great question. So the straits in the Western Pacific, or I should say the choke points is a better way to say it, of course. You've got the Straits of Malacca, and I'll come back to that in half a sec.
Okay.
You go north, traveling along the coast of China, essentially, you got the South China Sea. And then you go north of that, or actually closer to China, and you have the Straits of Taiwan, okay? Those are things that the United States and the rest of the world would like to maintain freedom of navigation, right? You know, security and allowing people to transit and trade. Why is that so important? About 25% of all trade around the globe goes through the Straits of Malacca. Interesting point number one. Interesting point number two is that trade includes things like oil, liquid natural gas, and the reason I bring those two up is the Chinese, 80% of their resources come through the Straits of Malacca. So they have, as we do, a large interest in that freedom of navigation. That's why when you said, and I had heard the same thing, when you said Indonesia was looking at pulling an Iran on us and trying to control the strait, there's a couple really angry bears that would probably not be worth poking, especially if you're Indonesia. So probably a good idea to steer clear of that one.
So that's really interesting. I mean, in this situation, China and the United States are pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, because, I mean, China would have a lot to lose if you threatened the Straits of Malacca in particular, because of their natural resources. I think that last I checked, the reserves in China for oil was 1.3 trillion gallons. But because they've got over 1.3 billion people, they would go through their what they've got coming in if it stopped, and into their reserves, and within a couple of months they would be in pretty rough shape. And honestly, I don't think we want them to be in rough shape. I mean, this is not a fight that is. It's something we would like to avoid. Because it could go very poorly for them. And if I look back at World War II and what got things kicked off there, so now talking about when you start to impede the straits and you start to put pressure on China, I believe it was Japan that kind of felt like it was getting boxed in and worried about its rubber and oil imports. And that's when they started pushing their borders out in order to protect the natural resources. We definitely don't want to go down that miscalculation route, I guess is my point.
So when you look at, again, the straits, I think if you were looking at table games 10 years ago, how we would protect Taiwan was very different then than now. Am I misreading it? I mean,
yes. Well,
okay.
No, you're not misreading it. It is different. I think the first thing I would hit before I went into the importance of defending it is why it's so important.
Okay.
Because I didn't quite get into any depth there. But the Straits of Taiwan, most of your semiconductors are your rare earth elements. So China provides over 90% of rare earth elements for things like semiconductors, which are important for electronics, exquisite weapon systems. You get the point, right? So over 90% comes from China. 90% of what's actually manufactured comes from Taiwan, right? So you can see why protecting or not threatening that strait would be good for everybody, right? But what that also tells you is there is a risk factor there. You know, if you're looking at levers you can turn, so you talk about the oil lever and not making miscalculations, well, you've got a semiconductor lever as well. So if I broadcast that in my mind back to what's happening in Iran and the control of the Straits of Hormuz, oil, because guess what? About 20%, actually 80%. 20% of the oil for the reason that 80% going to China comes through the Straits of Malacca is it's coming from countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia. Basically, it's spread out in all the, not all Arab countries there. You've got some coming from Brazil as well. But the other 20% comes from Russia through the Pacific. So not through a particular choke point in that particular case. But when you look at starting to threaten some of that coming through, and you look at the Straits of Hormuz and controlling some of that oil progressing through, that becomes a little bit of a lever that is a counter lever to what could be a leverage point within the Straits of Taiwan. So not really wanting to press that, but you kind of wonder if there's a little crazy like a fox going on, right? So that's a good piece. Back to the defense side of it, how we would defend it, I think I would term it as it's evolved. It's evolved with the capabilities we have in order to, do what we said we'd do in the defense of Taiwan. Obviously, that changes by administration almost.
You know, one thing I've never understood, or at least in the last few years, you talked about how we are so dependent on China for rare earth, and how did that happen?
Well,
and what are we doing about it? And I know you and I talked about a company in Fort Worth that many of you may be familiar with, but can you elaborate on that?
It's a great example. So first I said that it's actually well over 90% of rare earth elements come out of China. Is China the only one that has rare earth elements? The answer is no, right? What China did was they invested in the ability to refine, okay? And that is the key point right there, is nobody else has really made that investment yet. So to Jim's point, which is great and really exciting actually, there's a company called MP Materials in Fort Worth. And so they are manufacturing magnets, which are on contract, at least for a lot of them, with EV, electric vehicles, right? Because you need those magnets for the drive systems on these electric vehicles. So they are taking those rare earth elements from places like California, Utah, and they are refining them. So they're investing in a totally indigenous, if you will, way to start getting after some of that. How do you invest in refining those rare earth elements to get the end product you're looking for?
And it's exciting in a change that the Department of War, Defense, is making such an investment in this.
Yeah, it is very exciting actually, and I think there's, of course, a lot more to go. This is the first step.
And it's good for this part of the country because we have so much investment and infrastructure in defense area. I can't believe how fast the clock is ticking, and I do want to ask you about nuclear proliferation, in that we don't want any more countries, I think, to have nuclear weapons.
Right.
Here's a statistic that really surprised me, and I think it shows what you were saying about maybe some uncertainty about U.S. position now in the world. South Korean citizens, 70+%, now say that they would like to see or support South Korea having its own nuclear capacity.
Right. So I saw that. I think part of it is, if you look at countries like Japan and South Korea, they both have the ability to make nuclear weapons relatively quickly. So there's no question about that. The reason they don't is confidence in the U.S. to step up, right, and to be that guarantor for deterrence. So as long as they're confident, I think that helps our game. Now, the other statistic, which you know as well, is the Japanese are exactly the opposite. They're 80% against. And one of the experiences I had after living in Japan twice is the reason they're against is there is a very long historical distrust between the Japanese people and what happened with the imperial government that led them into World War II, right? They felt that they were led into something that they weren't ready for, and obviously the consequences were rather catastrophic towards the end. Yeah. So that distrust is really still resident to a degree today. So that's why I think that they're very much opposed to it still, and the importance of what the U.S. means for deterrence in the region.
And the United States has said that if South Korea made an effort to acquire nuclear weapons, there would be consequences.
I think it would change the entire dynamic about how the U.S. operates out there. And let's face it, I mean, not just the countries in the Western Pacific, but there have been countries that we've opposed in world wars that came back around again, and we opposed them in another world war. And I think the idea that letting too much proliferation happen creates all kinds of additional challenges that we don't have today, and I don't think we want tomorrow.
You know, there's the National Security Strategy, which comes out every few years, and I want to read a quote from the one of 2022 with President Biden. "We do not seek to carve the world into blocks of spheres of influence." President Trump's National Security Strategy, which came out late last year, "We recognize the enduring reality that large nations will exert influence over their regions." Mm-hmm. We could talk about different parts of the world, but how is this being viewed? How will it play out in the Western Pacific?
I think it's definitely a change in tone. I think, to me, it's simply saying that the U.S., as you said, acknowledges the fact that we're not going to control every corner of the earth, nor should we. What it is saying is large nations are going to exert control in their particular regions. What the U.S. doesn't want, and what we're really getting at, is they do not want any one nation to exert control, unilateral control, in an area where we have national interest for our security, our prosperity. So that's the real focus, I think, is allowing us to be able to address that and just make sure that we can still operate, and really for everybody, you know, freedom to navigate and trade and all those important things to our security.
You've had such an extraordinary career as a military officer, actually a diplomat in many ways. This is the 250th anniversary of the United States. You talked about the importance of freedom. I remember when I was at the World Affairs Council, I would often ask speakers as distinguished as you to say, what does American exceptionalism mean to you? And I'd like that to be probably my last question.
Well, it could be a long question. No, the American exceptionalism, in my mind, it means something as far as something we have worked to, not exceptional as in I'm better than you, but exceptional in something that we created that is worthy of not just our prosperity, but the world's prosperity. And we've tried to bring people along with us in doing that. I think there's a lot to be proud of, but exceptionalism can kind of come across in a very negative tone sometimes. But in this particular case, I think we're talking about exceptionalism in what we've created as a nation and the people we've brought along with us. There's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, especially on our 250th. We have some young people in the audience. What would you tell them that they could take from your military service that would serve them?
So I think the thing that I focus on the most is this idea that there is never a predetermined outcome, right? You can't walk in the door saying that, in 30 years I'm going to be, or in this case 37 years, I'm going to be a lieutenant general in the Marine Corps. I had no idea. Like was talked about earlier, I thought it was 5 and I'm going to go do something else. The reason I say that is what I would offer that would be worthy of your consideration is take it a day at a time. Take it a month at a time. Stay committed. And as long as you're having fun, because fun is important, right? And you're committed to what you're doing, then those are the folks that I think stay around the longest because they have no expectation of what year 30 looks like. I think the ones that do, and all of a sudden they start down this career, there's a moment in which they don't match anymore. And that's generally when you go do something else. Whereas if you take it a day at a time and you put your heart and soul into it, pretty soon you turn around and it's 37 years and a half later and you're like, holy cow, where'd the time go? And that's what I would offer. It's just that approach.
General, it has been an honor. We covered a lot.
Mine as well.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jim, very much. I really appreciate it. Really well done.
General, thank you for your service, and thank you for tonight. Jim, well done as always. We can't thank you enough. One final time, let's put our hands together for that incredible group.